Take a slow breath. You're safe here. This is a story from Moonlight Japanese Sleep Stories. Cherry blossoms drifting after dusk. Prologue: the hour between light and night. The cherry blossoms began to drift after dusk. During the day, they were watched. People gathered beneath them, lifting their faces, raising their phones, spreading blue sheets across the ground. Laughter and voices filled the air, and the petals fell into open hands and paper cups. The trees endured this quietly, as they always did. But when the light softened, and the crowds thinned, when the sun slipped behind the low hills beyond the town, the blossoms changed their way of falling. At dusk, the air grew heavier. The petals no longer fluttered brightly. They moved more slowly, almost thoughtfully, as if they were listening to something only they could hear. Some fell straight down, others drifted sideways, caught by currents that moved unseen between the branches. They gathered along the river bank, on the stone steps, on the roofs of old houses, and on the dark surface of the water, where they floated for a time before continuing. This hour belonged to no one. It was not quite day, and not yet night. The shops had begun to close their shutters, but lamps were not fully lit. The sky held a deep blue that still remembered the sun, and the first stars waited patiently beyond it. The town rested within this hour. It was a small town, shaped by water and the passage of time. A river ran through its center, wide enough to reflect the sky, narrow enough to hear its own movement. Bridges crossed it at regular intervals, each one older than it appeared. Houses leaned slightly toward one another, their wooden frames darkened by decades of rain and seasons. The streets curved gently, rarely straight for long, as if they had learned to avoid certainty. In spring, the town slowed down. The blossoms were not new to it. They had been planted generations earlier, lining the river, the school grounds, the shrine paths, and the quiet roads that led toward the hills. Every year they returned, and every year they left, and the town adjusted its breathing to match their brief presence. At dusk, the sound of the river grew clearer. During the day, it was hidden beneath voices and footsteps, bicycles and passing cars. Now it spoke freely, water folding into water, carrying fragments of petals, reflections of branches, and the faint glow of lanterns as they began to wake. Somewhere, a train passed. Its sound arrived first as a vibration, then as a distant echo, then as a memory of sound lingering in the air. The tracks ran beyond the edge of town, close enough to be felt, far enough to remain unseen. This was the hour when memories loosened their grip. They did not arrive suddenly. They drifted, like the petals themselves, settling briefly before moving on. No one needed to call them. They came on their own, responding to the dimming light, to the smell of damp earth and blossoms, to the quiet that settled when the day finally released its hold. The town remembered many things. It remembered footsteps that no longer echoed on its streets, voices that had once called names into the evening air. It remembered seasons of waiting and seasons of return. It remembered joy without clinging to it, and sorrow without naming it. The blossoms continued to fall. Some landed on the surface of the river and were carried away. Others caught on branches lower down, trembling slightly before letting go. A few settled on the shoulders of passers-by, unnoticed, traveling with them for a short while. Dusk deepened. Lights appeared one by one in the windows of houses. Curtains were drawn. Kettles were set to boil. Radios murmured inside rooms where no one felt the need to speak. The town prepared itself for the night in small, familiar ways. Above it all, the blossoms drifted on. They did not hurry. They did not resist. They simply moved as the evening asked them to move. And somewhere within the town, a solitary figure walked beneath them, unaware that this exact balance of light and shadow would remain with them long after the petals had disappeared. Chapter 1: A town that breathes at night. Night did not arrive all at once. It unfolded slowly, like a careful thought. The last traces of daylight clung to the western sky, thinning gradually until they resembled memory more than light. Street lamps flickered on, their glow soft and amber, illuminating only small circles of pavement beneath them. Between these circles, shadows gathered comfortably, as if they had been waiting. The town breathed differently now. During the day, its breath was shallow and quick, shaped by schedules and signals, by the opening and closing of doors. At night, the breath deepened. Time stretched. Movements became deliberate, unhurried. A single person walked along the river path. They were neither young nor old in any remarkable way. Their steps were steady, familiar with the uneven stones beneath their feet. They wore a coat light enough for spring, its fabric brushed occasionally by drifting petals. Their hands rested loosely at their sides, empty. They did not look up at the blossoms. Not because they were uninterested, but because they had seen them many times before. The trees were part of the path, as constant as the river, as dependable as the curve of the road ahead. Looking up was unnecessary. The petals would find them regardless. The river reflected the lamps now, stretching each point of light into trembling lines that broke and reformed with the movement of the water. Petals floated among these reflections, pale shapes crossing gold and shadow. The person slowed as they walked. No destination required urgency. The town did not demand it. At night, especially in spring, it allowed wandering. Paths looped back on themselves. Streets led nowhere important, and that was their purpose. From across the river came the faint sound of dishes being washed. Water met ceramic, producing a soft, repetitive rhythm. Somewhere else, a television murmured, its words indistinct, its presence more important than its content. The air carried the scent of blossoms mixed with river water and the faint trace of wood smoke from an old house farther uphill. Memory moved gently here. The person walking felt it not as images or words, but as a subtle shift in the body, a loosening of the shoulders, a slowing of breath. Certain corners of the town held weight, not enough to burden, but enough to be noticed. They passed a small bridge. Its railing was cool beneath the hand when they rested their fingers on it. The bridge had been repaired many times, its surface replaced, its supports reinforced, yet it remained the same bridge it had always been. Standing there, one could feel the passage of countless crossings, each one ordinary, each one complete. The person paused, leaning slightly forward to look down at the water. Petals gathered briefly near the edge before being drawn back into the current. None stayed for long. That, too, was familiar. A breeze moved through the trees, stronger now, and a small flurry of blossoms descended all at once. Some brushed against the person's face. One caught briefly in their hair before falling away. They closed their eyes for a moment. Not in reflection, not in prayer. Simply to feel the air pass, the movement of the evening settling around them. When they opened their eyes, the town was unchanged. The river continued. The lights held steady. The night accepted them without question. They resumed walking. The path curved away from the river, leading into narrower streets where houses stood closer together. Here, the blossoms were fewer, replaced by the quiet presence of walls, doors, and windows. Potted plants rested near entrances, leaves dark and glossy in the lamplight. A cat crossed the street ahead, moving without hurry, disappearing into the shadow. The person followed the curve of the road, turning instinctively, guided by long habit rather than conscious choice. Each step felt placed within something larger, a pattern shaped over years. Above, the sky darkened fully. Stars emerged slowly, not in clusters, but one by one, as if testing the night. The moon, not yet full, hung low, its light thin and cool. The town exhaled. Somewhere, far beyond the houses and hills, the train passed again, its sound softer now, stretched thin by distance. It carried with it the idea of elsewhere, but not the need to go there. The person reached a small shrine tucked between two older buildings. Its gate stood open. No bells rang. A single lantern glowed near the steps, its light barely reaching the stone foxes resting nearby. Blossoms lay scattered across the ground, pale against the dark earth. The person stopped. They stood there for a while, neither entering nor leaving, simply existing within the space the shrine offered. The air felt different here, still, attentive. At last, they bowed their heads slightly. There were no words. Then they turned away, continuing down the street as the night settled fully into place. Behind them, unseen, the cherry blossoms continued to drift after dusk, marking time in their own quiet way. Chapter 2. The river carries what it is given. Morning returned quietly. It did not announce itself with brightness or sound. It arrived as a soft thinning of the dark, as if night itself had decided to loosen its hold without being asked. The sky lightened in small, careful degrees, moving from deep blue to a pale, uncertain gray. The town accepted this change without reaction. Windows remained closed. Doors stayed shut. The river continued its movement, indifferent to the hour. Cherry blossoms still clung to the branches, though fewer than the night before. Many now rested where they had fallen along the banks, in the shallow edges of the water, gathered against stones and roots. The river carried what it was given. It always had. As light spread slowly across the surface, reflections began to form again. Not the sharp reflections of midday, but something softer, more fragile. The sky appeared broken into pieces by the water's movement, each fragment trembling gently as it passed. A bird called from somewhere unseen. Then another. The sounds were brief and uninsistent, as if the morning itself were still deciding whether to stay. Along the river path, the solitary figure returned. They walked more slowly now than they had the night before. Morning changed the shape of familiar places, revealing details that darkness had allowed to blur. Cracks in stone, faded paint on railings. Moss grows patiently where no one thought to remove it. The blossoms on the ground were no longer falling. They had reached the end of that movement. Now they lay still, their brief flight complete. The person stepped carefully, avoiding them when possible, though some were inevitably crushed beneath their shoes. The sound was nearly silent. A faint suggestion of texture, nothing more. They did not look down. The river drew their attention instead. In daylight, it seemed narrower, more practical, less inclined to hold a mystery. Its surface revealed the stones beneath, the slow plants anchored along the edges, the gentle debris moving without resistance. The person stopped near the same bridge as before. They rested their hands on the railing again. The metal was warmer now, holding the memory of the coming day. Below, petals drifted in loose clusters, separating and rejoining as the current decided. Nothing remained whole for long. The person watched without judgment. There was comfort in this. In watching something move forward without intention, without expectation. The river did not choose what it carried. It accepted everything equally: petals, leaves, fragments of light, the occasional reflection of a passing cloud. Beyond the bridge, the town began to stir. A door opened somewhere. Footsteps echoed briefly, then faded. A bicycle passed along a street farther back, its bell ringing once, lightly, more out of habit than necessity. The morning air held a coolness that would not last. Spring days here often did this. They began with restraint, as if testing the patience of those who waited for warmth. By afternoon, the air would soften, sunlight would settle more confidently on roofs and streets, and the blossoms would glow again. For now, everything remained in balance. The person left the bridge and continued along the path. As they walked, memory followed, not closely, not insistently, but at a respectful distance. Certain places along the river held echoes, though none were sharp enough to demand attention. Here, a bench where someone had once waited. There, a bend in the path where laughter had briefly filled the air before moving on. These moments did not return as scenes. They arrived instead as impressions, like the faint warmth left behind after someone had passed through a room. The town did not insist on remembering. It allowed its memories to exist without being summoned. Ahead, the path curved toward a narrow set of steps leading down to the water's edge. The person descended slowly, aware of the dampness beneath their feet. The stones were worn smooth by years of use, by countless careful descents and returns. At the bottom, the river felt closer. Its sound deepened, no longer distant or decorative. Here, it spoke continuously, a language made entirely of movement. The person crouched near the edge. They extended a hand, fingers hovering just above the surface. The water moved beneath, indifferent to the gesture. When their fingertips finally touched, the cold registered immediately, sharp and clean. They did not pull away. They let the sensation remain for a moment longer than necessary. The cold traveled upward, grounding them firmly in the present. Then they withdrew their hand and stood. Droplets clung briefly to their skin before slipping back into the river, rejoining what they had never truly left. The person turned away from the water and climbed the steps again. By the time they reached the top, the town had woken more fully. Shops remained closed, but signs of life multiplied quietly. Curtains shifted. Voices murmured behind walls. The distant sound of a train arrived once more, this time clearer, more defined. Movement, but not urgency. The person followed the path as it led away from the river, toward streets that carried the shape of daily routines. Here, the blossoms were fewer. Their presence gave way to practical things: mailboxes, signs, the faint smell of bread from a small bakery beginning its work. A delivery truck passed slowly, careful not to disturb the narrow road. The person paused at an intersection. They stood there, neither turning nor advancing, simply allowing the morning to move around them. Sunlight touched the edges of buildings, illuminating only what it reached directly, leaving the rest in gentle shade. Above, the blossoms remained. They did not fall now. They waited. The person eventually chose a direction not because it was better, but because it was there. Their steps resumed their steady rhythm, familiar and unremarkable. As they walked, the town adjusted. It always did. It had learned long ago that people came and went, that moments passed whether they were noticed or not. What mattered was not holding on, but remaining open to seasons, to light, to the quiet continuation of time. Behind the person, the river carried the last of the petals from the night before. Ahead, the day unfolded slowly, offering nothing extraordinary. And that, in this town, was more than enough. Chapter 3, where afternoon grows quiet. The afternoon did not insist on itself. It arrived gradually, almost unnoticed, carried in by the slow warming of the air and the subtle shift of light across the town. Shadows shortened, then softened, losing their edges as the sun climbed higher. The sharpness of morning eased into something more forgiving. The town accepted this without ceremony. By now, doors were open. A few shops had lifted their shutters partway, enough to suggest availability rather than invitation. The bakery released a steady breath of warmth and scent into the street east. Sugar, something faintly toasted. People passed by without hurry, some entering, others continuing, their decisions made quietly, without visible thought. The blossoms remained above it all. In daylight, they appeared fuller, their pale pink deepened by the sun. The branches moved gently, responding to a breeze that traveled unevenly through the streets. Petals still fell, but not with the same intention as before. Now they dropped occasionally, singularly, as if by accident. The person walked through this softened afternoon. Their pace matched the hour. neither slow nor quick, but adaptable, shifting slightly as the street demanded. They carried nothing. No bag, no visible purpose. Their hands remained relaxed, open, free of tension. They passed the bakery. Inside, a bell rang briefly as someone entered, then fell silent again. The sound did not follow them. It stayed where it belonged. The street widened slightly ahead, opening into a small square where a few benches rested beneath young trees. The blossoms here were less dense, the branches still learning how to hold their weight. Petals gathered lightly on the ground, scattered rather than layered. The person chose a bench near the edge. They sat without settling heavily, their posture upright but unstrained. From here, they could see the street without being part of its movement. People passed through the square in gentle arcs, rarely stopping, rarely looking up. Time moved differently here. It did not press forward. It spread outward, filling the space evenly. Each moment held its shape before yielding to the next. A breeze passed through the square. Leaves responded first, turning their undersides briefly toward the light. The blossoms followed more slowly, a delayed response that sent a small handful of petals drifting downward. They landed near the person's feet, their movement complete. The person watched. There was no particular thought attached to the action. Watching required nothing from them. It was enough to be present, to allow the scene to continue without interference. Across the square, a child paused, looking down at something held carefully in both hands. An adult stood nearby, waiting without impatience. After a moment, the child straightened, and they continued together. The moment closed behind them. The person shifted slightly on the bench. The wood was warm now, holding the sun's attention. It would cool again later. Everything here followed that pattern. From this place, the distant river could still be heard, not clearly, but enough to remind anyone listening that it continued to move. The sound wove itself through the square, subtle and consistent, unnoticed by most. Above, clouds began to gather. They were thin at first, stretched wide across the sky, their edges soft and indistinct. They moved slowly, reshaping themselves without urgency. The person eventually stood. They did not check the time. There was no need. The afternoon would continue regardless of their awareness. They left the square by a side street, one less traveled, where houses stood farther apart, and gardens claimed more space. Here, the blossoms appeared again, lining the road in a quieter formation. Petals rested on low walls, on mailboxes, on the tops of bicycles leaned carefully against fences. They had settled into these places without preference. The person walked through them. Occasionally, a petal clung briefly to their sleeve before letting go. The gesture felt almost intentional, though it was not. The street sloped gently upward. With each step, the town spread out behind them. Roof lines overlapped, then separated, revealing glimpses of the river beyond, a thin ribbon of movement cutting through stillness. The person paused near the crest of the slope. From here, the town appeared contained. Not small, but complete. Everything it needed was visible or implied. The paths, the water, the spaces where people gathered, and the spaces they left empty. The blossoms framed this view. They did not obscure it. They softened its edges. The person remained there for a while. The clouds continued their slow migration. Light shifted again, losing some of its warmth as the sun began its gradual descent. Afternoon leaned toward evening without signaling the change. Eventually, the person turned back. Their steps followed a different route, looping rather than retracing. The town allowed this. Its streets were designed not to hurry anyone back to where they had been. As they descended, the air cooled slightly. The scent of blossoms deepened, joined by earth and stone and something faintly metallic from the river below. Windows reflected the changing sky, their glass catching fragments of light and releasing them. The person passed the shrine again. In daylight, it appeared smaller, more ordinary. The lantern was unlit now, its presence unnecessary. The stone figures rested as they always had, unchanged by the hour. The person did not stop this time. They continued, allowing the afternoon to thin around them. Far off, the sound of the train returned, clearer now, carrying with it the knowledge of distance and motion. It passed without invitation, without promise. The blossoms stirred once more. Not many fell. Most remained where they were, waiting for night to return. As the sun lowered, the town prepared again quietly, without marking the transition. The afternoon loosened its hold, and evening approached, familiar and unremarkable. The person walked on, and the day, having offered what it could, began to withdraw. Chapter 4 Evening returns without sound. Evening returned the way it always did. Not as an arrival, but as a release. The afternoon loosened its shape, its warmth thinning gradually, as if the day itself were exhaling. Light softened again, no longer resting fully on surfaces, but slipping around edges, lingering briefly before moving on. The town felt this change before it could be seen. Movements slowed, voices lowered, doors closed more carefully than before. The air cooled enough to be noticed, but not enough to resist. The person walked as evening gathered. They did not mark the hour. They did not need to. The town carried the time for them, shifting its weight subtly, guiding each step without instruction. Shadows lengthened. They stretched across streets and walls, overlapping gently, losing their earlier definition. Where they met, they blended, becoming something softer, something less distinct. The blossoms responded. They moved again, stirred by air that had learned the path of cooling. Petals loosened their hold, one by one, then in small groups, falling with a patience that belonged only to this hour. The person passed beneath them. A few petals brushed their shoulders, their hair, their coat. None stayed for long. The contact was brief, almost imagined, yet unmistakable. They continued. The river appeared ahead, darker now, its surface less reflective, more absorbent. It took in the fading light without comment, holding only fragments, releasing the rest. Along its edge, the stones cooled quickly. The person walked close enough to hear the water clearly again. Its sound had changed since morning, deeper, more continuous, less scattered. It no longer competed with the day. It simply spoke. They slowed, not because they intended to stop, but because the evening asked them to. The air felt heavier here, layered with moisture and scent. Blossoms, river, earth, all of it combined into something unnameable, something familiar. A lamp flickered on across the water. Then another. The reflections stretched toward the person, trembling gently, breaking apart with each movement of the current. The person stood near the railing. They rested their hands on it, feeling the coolness return to the metal. The warmth of earlier hours had already faded, leaving behind only memory. They watched the water. Petals drifted through the lamplight, pale shapes passing through gold, then disappearing into darkness. None resisted. None hesitated. The river carried them all the same. Behind the person, the town adjusted again. Shutters closed fully now. Footsteps became fewer, more deliberate. The sounds of evening meals traveled briefly through open windows before being contained once more. A radio played somewhere, low and steady. The person turned away from the river. They followed a street that curved inward, away from the water, toward older houses where evening settled earliest. Here, light pooled unevenly beneath lamps, leaving long stretches of shadow between. The blossoms were thicker along this road. They formed a pale canopy overhead, catching what remained of the sky. As the light dimmed, their color shifted, losing its softness, becoming something closer to white. The person walked beneath them slowly. The street felt narrower now, though it had not changed. Evening altered perception, drawing attention inward, compressing space gently. At the end of the road, the shrine appeared again. This time, its lantern was lit. The glow was small, contained, yet enough to reshape the space around it. Stone figures emerged from the shadow, their forms softened by the warm light. Petals gathered at their feet, unmoving. The person stopped. They stood at the base of the steps, neither approaching nor retreating. The shrine did not demand entry. It simply existed, offering its presence without expectation. The person breathed. The air entered and left without effort. Each breath felt complete, unhurried. A breeze passed through the trees. The blossoms responded immediately. A quiet rain of petals descended, filling the space between ground and branch. The movement was gentle, sustained, as if the trees had chosen this moment deliberately. Petals touched stone, wood, fabric. They reached the ground and stayed. The person remained still until the movement ended. Then, without gesture or ceremony, they bowed their heads slightly. No words followed. They turned and continued down the street. Night approached now with confidence. The sky deepened, losing its last traces of color. Stars appeared again, faint at first, then clearer, settling into their places without disruption. The moon rose higher, its light thin but steady. The town exhaled once more. Somewhere, far beyond the hills, the train passed again, its sound stretched and softened by distance. It moved through the night without stopping, carrying with it the idea of elsewhere, never insisting upon it. The person walked on. Behind them, the blossoms lay where they had fallen. Above them, the branches rested. And evening, having returned without sound, settled fully into the night. Chapter 5. When the town begins to sleep. Night settled gently. It did not press down on the town. It rested there, spreading evenly, filling spaces without resistance. The last movements of the evening slowed until they became indistinguishable from stillness. The sky held its depth. Stars remained fixed, their light steady and distant. The moon drifted slightly higher, its presence quiet, unremarked. Clouds that had gathered earlier thinned, dissolving into the darkness without leaving a trace. The town grew smaller, not in size, but in sound. Each noise now carried farther, each movement more noticeable precisely because there were fewer of them. A door closing echoed softly. A footstep lingered before fading. Then nothing followed. The person walked through this narrowing world. Their steps were slower now, their rhythm aligned with the hour. The day had released them fully. No expectations followed. No tasks remained. Street lamps marked the path ahead. Each pool of light existed independently, a small island of clarity surrounded by shadow. The person passed from one to the next, briefly visible, then absorbed again. The blossoms were nearly still. Only an occasional petal moved now, falling without ceremony, completing its descent long after attention had shifted elsewhere. Most rested where they had landed earlier, pale against the dark ground. The person reached the river once more. At night, it no longer reflected the sky. Instead, it absorbed light, holding only fragments, broken stars, wavering lamps, the thin line of the moon distorted by motion. The sound of the water deepened further. It was no longer a background presence. It became the dominant voice, steady and continuous, offering no variation, no emphasis. It spoke of continuation, of movement without intention. The person stopped near the edge. They stood without leaning, without shifting. Their posture suggested neither waiting nor watching, only presence. Time passed. Not measured, not counted. It simply moved. A breeze traveled low across the water. It reached the bank, stirring petals that had gathered there. They lifted briefly, then settled again, their movement incomplete, their rest resumed. The person remained. Breath moved in and out, unnoticed. The cool of the night reached the skin fully now, but without discomfort. The body adjusted, as it always did. Behind them, the town slept. Lights dimmed one by one in distant windows. Curtains closed completely. The quiet deepened until it felt layered, held together by the river's sound. The person turned away at last. They followed a narrow path leading uphill, away from the water, toward streets where lamps were fewer and darkness more complete. Here, shadows no longer gathered, they remained. Houses rested silently. Their shapes were familiar, even when reduced to outlines. Roofs and walls blended into one another, separated only by memory. The blossoms overhead were barely visible now. They existed as pale suggestions, their presence known more by scent than sight. The air held that sweetness still, though muted, softened by night. The person passed the shrine once more. This time, the lantern had been extinguished. The space returned to shadow, its form implied rather than seen. Stone figures merged with darkness, their outlines dissolving. The person did not stop. There was no need. The shrine remained whether acknowledged or not. They continued. At the edge of the street, a single cat sat motionless, watching nothing in particular. Its eyes caught the light briefly, then faded as the person passed. The path curved gently, guiding them toward quieter ground. Here, the town released its final hold. No distant trains passed. No radios murmured. Even the river's voice softened, thinned by distance. Only one night remained. The person slowed further. Each step felt deliberate, yet effortless. The body knew this pace well. It was the pace of returning, though not to a specific place. Above, a single blossom detached from its branch. It fell slowly, unnoticed, completing its journey in silence. The person walked on, and the town, having done all it needed to do, began to sleep fully, its breath deep, its movements stilled, its memories at rest until morning. Chapter 6: The Shape of Midnight Silence. Midnight arrived without a boundary. There was no clear moment when evening ended, and something else began. The transition passed unnoticed, like a breath taken and released without thought. Time thinned until it no longer marked itself. The town existed in layers of quiet. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of very little. The river still spoke, but softly now, its voice stretched thin by distance and night. Leaves shifted occasionally. Somewhere, far off, something settled and became still again. The person moved through this silence. Their steps were nearly soundless. The ground seemed to accept them, absorbing each footfall without reply. The street no longer guided them clearly. Lamps were fewer here, their light dimmer, their reach uncertain. Darkness gathered comfortably. It filled spaces between buildings, beneath trees, along the edges of paths. It did not conceal. It simplified. The person's awareness turned inward. Not sharply, not deliberately. It drifted, following the same rhythm as the night. Thoughts did not form as words or images. They existed instead as sensations: weight, temperature, the subtle alignment of breath and movement. Memory changed shape here. It no longer appeared as a recollection. It existed as an atmosphere. Certain streets felt heavier. Certain corners felt open. None demanded explanation. The person paused beneath a tree. The blossoms above were barely visible, but their presence could be felt. The scent lingered faintly, diluted by cool air, by time. A single petal brushed the ground nearby, its sound too soft to register. They remained there. Stillness deepened around them. The body adjusted again, finding balance within the quiet. Muscles loosened. Breathing slowed further, lengthening naturally, uncounted. In the distance, a train passed. Its sound was different now. Not an announcement, not a reminder. It arrived as vibration first, then tone, then absence. The idea of movement existed briefly, then dissolved. The person listened without listening. The town held them. Houses slept fully now. Windows were dark. Streets were empty. The earlier layers of sound, voices, dishes, radios had all withdrawn. Only the essential remained. The person resumed walking. The path they followed was less defined, more suggestion than direction. It curved gently, guided by habit rather than sight. Their feet knew where to go, even when the mind did not ask. Above, the sky held its depth. Stars were clearer now, sharper against the darkness. They did not flicker. They rested. The moon, partially hidden by thin cloud, softened the night further, its light diffused, uninsistent. The person crossed a small bridge. At night, it felt longer than before. The water below was nearly invisible, but its sound was unmistakable. It moved continuously, unconcerned with observation. The person stopped at the center. They placed their hands on the railing, feeling the cold fully now. It was clean, grounding, undeniable. They breathed. The river continued. Nothing else happened. Time passed. Eventually, the person released the railing and continued on. The far side of the bridge opened into a street rarely used at this hour. Trees stood closer together. Their branches overlapped, forming a dark canopy overhead. The blossoms here had mostly fallen. Petals lay scattered beneath the trees, pale against earth and stone. They did not move. The person walked carefully through them, their steps deliberate but light. There was no desire to disturb what had settled. At the end of the street, the path narrowed further. Here, the town felt distant, reduced to a presence rather than a place. The person could no longer hear the river clearly. The sound had thinned, stretched too far to carry meaning. Silence shaped itself fully, not empty, complete. The person stopped again. They stood there, surrounded by night, by the faint scent of blossoms, by the soft outline of things known but unseen. Breath moved. The body remained. There was nothing to add. And in that space unmarked by hour or intention, the town held its deepest quiet, allowing everything within it to rest. Chapter 7. Before the first light stirs. The deepest quiet came just before morning. It was not sudden. It gathered slowly, layer by layer, until nothing remained that wished to move. Even the night seemed to pause, holding itself in a careful stillness. The town rested inside this pause. No lamps flickered. No windows glowed. Streets lay empty, their shapes simplified by darkness until they became outlines rather than places. Trees stood without motion, their branches no longer responding to the air. The blossoms were completely still. Petals rested where they had fallen, their pale surfaces catching no light, their presence known only by memory and scent. The branches above held what remained without releasing anything further. The person stood within this hour. They had stopped walking without deciding to do so. Movement had simply lost its necessity. Their body remained upright, balanced, breathing quietly, as if sleep itself had passed nearby without claiming them. Time thinned further. It no longer moved forward. It widened. The person felt it not as duration, but as space open, unoccupied, allowing nothing to intrude. Thought did not form. Sensation remained, but faintly, like an echo that had forgotten its source. The river was barely audible now. Its sound had stretched too far to remain clear, reduced to a suggestion rather than a voice. It continued, of course. It always did. But here, in this hour, it asked nothing to be heard. The sky began to change. Not visibly. Not yet. Something shifted behind the darkness, subtle enough to escape notice. The blackness above loosened imperceptibly, becoming less complete, less final. The town sensed this before any light appeared. A bird stirred somewhere deep within the trees. Not a call, not a song, only movement. Feathers adjusted. A branch accepted the weight change. Then stillness returned. The person remained. Their breath lengthened slightly, deepening without effort. The body responded to something it did not name, something older than thought. The blossoms overhead held steady. They would not fall now. This hour belonged to holding, not release. The sky lightened again, just enough to suggest depth. Darkness became layered, revealing faint distinctions where before there had been none. The outline of roofs emerged. The suggestion of hills formed beyond the town. The person became visible again. Not clearly. Just enough. They shifted their weight once, slowly, testing the ground beneath their feet. It responded firmly, unchanged by the night. In the distance, the river found its voice again. Softly at first. A low, continuous movement returning to awareness. It did not announce itself. It simply resumed being heard. A second bird called. This time, the sound traveled farther, thinner, fragile against the remaining dark. It did not repeat itself. The town remained still. No doors opened. No lights appeared. Morning had not arrived. It waited, patient, careful not to disturb what rested. The person took a step. Then another. Movement returned gently, without urgency. Their pace was slower than before, shaped by the lingering quiet. Each step felt deliberate, placed with attention, as if the ground itself were listening. They followed a familiar path. Even now, even in near darkness, the town guided them. Curves appeared where expected. Slopes revealed themselves beneath the feet. Memory and body moved together without effort. Above, the blossoms began to emerge from the shadow. Their color had not returned yet. They appeared as pale forms against a sky that was no longer fully black. They waited, unchanged. The person passed beneath them once more. No petals fell. This, too, felt right. The sky shifted again. A faint line appeared at the horizon, barely lighter than the rest. It did not spread quickly. It held its place, a quiet promise rather than an event. The town breathed. Slowly. Deeply. The person continued walking, guided not by destination, but by the gentle return of direction. Morning had not arrived, but it had begun to think about arriving. And in this space between the deepest night and the first suggestion of day, everything remained suspended, complete, and at rest. Chapter 8. When light begins to remember. Light returned slowly. Not as brightness, not as warmth, but as permission. The darkness loosened its hold without resistance, allowing space for something else to exist beside it. The sky softened first, shifting from deep shadow to a muted gray that carried no promise yet, only possibility. The town felt this change immediately. Its stillness adjusted, becoming lighter, less absolute. The quiet remained, but it changed texture, thinning at the edges. What had been complete silence became openness. The person walked as light remembered itself. Their outline sharpened slightly with each step. The ground beneath their feet gained detail: small stones, shallow cracks, the subtle unevenness that night had smoothed away. Above, the blossoms took shape again. They were no longer only scent and memory. Their branches reappeared, delicate against the brightening sky. Petals clung quietly, waiting. Those that had fallen rested unchanged, pale against dark earth. The river found its reflection. At first, it held only the sky's lightening tone, stretched and broken by movement. Then shapes returned: banks, stones, the suggestion of color. The water accepted these without pause, carrying them forward. The person stopped near the river. They stood where the path widened slightly, allowing room to remain without obstruction. Morning did not hurry them. It arrived at its own pace, indifferent to observation. A bird called again. This time, the sound was clearer. It did not hesitate. It crossed the air confidently, settling briefly before dissolving into the growing light. Another followed. Then another. The calls did not overlap. Each existed fully, then ended, leaving space behind. The town responded. Somewhere, a window opened. The sound was faint, controlled, careful not to disturb what lingered. Footsteps followed briefly, then stopped. The person watched the river. Petals moved again now, not falling, but drifting released earlier, carried forward without memory of where they had come from. They turned slowly as they passed, catching light on their surfaces before slipping onward. The air warmed almost imperceptibly. It did not announce itself. It simply adjusted, easing the sharpness left by night. The body noticed before the mind did. The person breathed in. The scent of blossoms returned more clearly now, joined by damp earth, stone, and water. Morning held all of it lightly, not claiming ownership. The sky brightened further. Color returned cautiously. Blue emerged first, faint and diluted, spreading unevenly. Clouds appeared as soft forms, their edges still uncertain. The town stretched, not visibly, but in feeling. Space expanded again. Distances lengthened. The sense of enclosure left by night dissolved. The person resumed walking. Their pace changed slightly, responding to the light. Each step felt less contained, less inward. The town offered more direction now, more visible paths. They passed the bridge again. In the morning, it appeared ordinary. Useful. Its surface bore marks of wear, signs of repair. Yet beneath that ordinariness remained the quiet weight of countless crossings. The person rested their hand on the railing once more. It was cool, but no longer cold. They did not linger. Movement felt natural again. As they continued, the town revealed more of itself. Streets unfolded. Houses regained detail. Potted plants caught light on their leaves, holding small reflections. The blossoms above shifted gently. A breeze moved through them, light enough to stir but not to release. Branches responded, leaves turning briefly toward the sun. One petal fell. It drifted slowly, alone, completing a movement begun hours earlier. It landed near the river's edge and remained. The person noticed this without stopping. Morning did not require a pause. Ahead, the town prepared quietly. Shutters lifted partway. Signs were adjusted. The promise of routine settled back into place without weight. The person walked on. Behind them, night released its final hold. Above them, light continued to remember itself. And the town, having rested fully, began once more to breathe with the day. Chapter 9 The morning learns its shape. Morning did not rush. It unfolded carefully, as if testing each moment before allowing it to remain. Light strengthened, but slowly, warming surfaces without claiming them. The sky settled into a pale blue, still thin, still quiet. The town adjusted again. This time, the change was more visible. Shutters lifted fully. Doors opened. Footsteps appeared, measured and unhurried. Voices emerged briefly, low and contained, then faded as people continued on their paths. The person moved among these beginnings. They did not stand apart, but neither did they blend completely. Their pace remained steady, attentive to the flow around them without being carried by it. The blossoms were fully visible now. They glowed softly, their color deepened by the growing light. Branches held their weight gracefully, though gaps were beginning to appear where petals had already gone. The season was moving, quietly but without pause. The person passed beneath them. A few petals drifted down, responding to a breeze that traveled unevenly through the street. They landed on shoulders, on bags, on the ground, completing movements unnoticed. The street led toward a familiar crossing. Here, the river was narrower, its banks closer, its sound clearer. Morning light revealed its details, fully stones beneath the surface, plants bending with the current, fragments of reflection breaking and reforming. The person stopped briefly. They watched the water carry what remained of the night petals released hours earlier, shadows now gone, reflections reshaped. The river did not hesitate. It continued, as it always had, accepting morning without adjustment. Across the bridge, the town grew busier. A bicycle passed, its wheels whispering against the road. A delivery truck stopped briefly, then moved on. The smell of food returned: rice, bread, something fried carried lightly on the air. The person crossed the bridge. Their steps were even, unremarkable. The structure held, unchanged by the passage. On the other side, the path widened. Here, the blossoms lined both sides, forming a gentle corridor of color. The ground beneath was patterned with fallen petals, unevenly distributed, already thinning where feet had passed. The person walked through this corridor. They did not slow. Morning encouraged continuation, not pause. It invited participation without insistence. A school bell rang in the distance. The sound traveled clearly, clean and brief, then ended. It did not repeat. Children's voices followed, contained, moving together, then away. Their energy passed through the town without lingering. The person turned down a quieter street. Here, gardens faced the road. Small plots of earth held early flowers, leaves catching sunlight, surfaces still damp with dew. Watering cans rested where they had been left, patient. The blossoms overhead shifted again. A few more petals fell, then stopped. The branches steadied, holding what remained. The person paused near a low wall. They rested a hand against its surface, feeling the texture cool stone warming gradually. The sensation grounded them fully in the present. They released the wall and continued. Morning had found its rhythm now. It moved steadily, confident but not urgent. The town matched it, slipping easily into familiar patterns. Shops opened. Signs swung gently. Conversations repeated the same shapes they always did. The person moved within this without disruption. They were part of it, though nothing marked them as such. The river remained audible, though less dominant now, sharing space with the sounds of waking life. Its voice blended rather than led. Above, the blossoms held their place. They would not last much longer. This was known without being spoken. The person walked on, and the morning, having learned its shape, carried the town forward into the day. Chapter 10. The day closes its gentle circle. Daylight settled fully. It no longer tested the town. It rested there with quiet confidence, filling streets and rooms evenly, touching everything without preference. The earlier softness of morning gave way to clarity, though not sharpness. Spring held the light gently. The town moved within this balance. Routines resumed, not as obligations, but as familiar shapes. Shops welcomed their first steady visitors. Doors opened and closed with practiced ease. Footsteps layered softly over one another, creating a rhythm that required no attention. The person continued walking. Their pace matched the town now, neither ahead nor behind. The solitude of night and early morning had thinned, but it had not disappeared. It remained within them, settled, unobtrusive. The blossoms watched over the streets. Their color was at its fullest here, illuminated evenly from above. Gaps among the branches revealed how much had already fallen, how much had already moved on. What remained did not resist the change. A breeze passed through. This time, it was stronger. Branches swayed visibly. A soft cascade of petals followed, more than before, though still gentle. They filled the air briefly, crossing one another, catching light, then descending without order. People noticed now. Some slowed. Some looked up. A few smiled briefly before continuing. The moment did not hold them long. The person walked through the falling petals. They did not alter their pace. The petals brushed against them, landed on their shoulders, their coat, their hands. Most fell away almost immediately. One remained. It rested briefly on their sleeve. Its edges curled slightly, its color pale but intact. The person did not remove it. They allowed it to remain until movement dislodged it naturally. The petal fell. The ground accepted it. The river appeared once more ahead. In daylight, it was fully revealed, carrying reflections of sky, branches, and passing shapes. The water moved steadily, unchanged by observation, unchanged by time of day. The person stopped near the bank. They watched the surface, the way light fractured and rejoined with each movement. Petals continued to pass, fewer now, more scattered. None stayed together for long. The river carried them forward, completing what the trees had begun. Behind the person, the town continued. Conversations overlapped gently. The sound of work settled into place. Life unfolded in small, ordinary gestures that did not seek meaning. The person stood quietly. They did not feel separate from any of it. They did not feel absorbed either. The moment held both states without conflict. Eventually, they turned away from the river. Their path led back toward the heart of the town, toward streets that no longer felt quiet but still felt calm. The blossoms lined the way, their presence steady, their departure already underway. Above, the sky held its blue. Below, petals marked the ground, thinning as they were carried away by feet, by wind, by water. The person walked on. The town breathed with the day, just as it had breathed with the night. Nothing needed to be remembered for it to continue. Nothing needed to be held. The circle closed quietly, and somewhere within it, the cherry blossoms drifted on after dusk, after dawn, after notice, completing their passage without pause. Chapter 11. After the blossoms have gone. The blossoms did not all leave at once. There was no single morning when the trees stood bare and complete in their absence. The change arrived gradually, scattered across days, unnoticed until it had already settled. Petals thinned. What had once gathered in pale layers along the river banks now appeared only in fragments caught briefly against stones. Pressed into damp earth, clinging to corners where wind hesitated. Most had already been carried away, released into water or ground, or air without ceremony. The town adjusted. It always did. Branches that had held color now revealed their structure. Leaves, small and new, began to take the place of what had fallen. The light passing through them changed, filtered differently, sharper in places, deeper in others. The person walked beneath these altered trees. The path was the same. The stones had not shifted. The river continued to move with the same steady rhythm. And yet, something subtle had lifted, leaving behind a quiet openness. The scent of blossoms faded. In its place came other notes: fresh leaves, soil warmed by sun, the faint mineral trace of the river. Spring moved forward without hesitation, uninterested in pause. The person felt this without naming it. Their steps remained steady. Their pace is unchanged. What had softened them during the falling of petals now rested deeper, no longer tied to sight or scent. They reached the river again. The water carried nothing pale now. No drifting petals caught the light. Instead, reflections moved cleanly, branches, clouds, passing birds, each appearing briefly before dissolving. The river looked lighter without the blossoms, more open. The person stood at the bank, hands relaxed at their sides. They did not wait for anything to appear. They simply remained long enough to notice that nothing needed to. Across the water, the town continued its quiet work. Clothes hung on lines. Doors opened and closed. Bicycles passed, their sounds familiar, unremarkable. Life returned fully to its unadorned rhythm. The blossoms had given the town a pause. Their absence returned it to motion. The person turned away from the river and followed a street that led slightly uphill. Here, trees lined the road, now mostly green. Only a few pale remnants clung stubbornly to high branches, their time extended by height alone. They would fall soon enough. Nothing here lingered indefinitely. The person walked past the shrine. Without blossoms, it felt more contained. Its presence remained unchanged, though the softness that had surrounded it earlier had lifted. The space felt clear, attentive, unembellished. They did not stop. The shrine did not require it. Evening approached again, not dramatically, not with the same tenderness it had carried before. Light shifted, shadows lengthened, but without the added movement of falling petals. The transition felt simpler, more direct. The town breathed. The day released its hold. The person continued, their figure moving steadily through streets that no longer gathered. Crowds beneath trees that no longer held blankets or laughter beneath branches. The season had moved forward. What remained was not lost. It was a continuation, and in the spaces where blossoms had once drifted after dusk, there was now only air open, quiet, ready for whatever would follow. Chapter 12: What Remains After Dusk. What remained was not visible at first. The trees stood green now, their branches filled with leaves that caught the light differently. Streets no longer held traces of pale color. The river moved without carrying anything that reminded the eye of what had passed. And yet, something lingered. Not in form, not in scent, not in sound. It existed instead as a quiet alignment between things, the way the town held its evenings. The way light softened before night, the way footsteps slowed without instruction. The person walked through this altered season. Their path was familiar. It always had been. The town had not changed its shape to accommodate the blossoms, nor had it reshaped itself after they were gone. What had changed was subtler than that. It was the way time was felt. Evening approached again. The sky dimmed gently, its color thinning toward blue, then gray. Lamps flickered on, one by one, their glow steady and patient. The town prepared itself without urgency, just as it always did. The person passed beneath trees that no longer shed petals. Leaves stirred instead, responding to air that moved without purpose. The sound was different, lighter, more continuous, less delicate. It filled the space where silence once rested. The river appeared ahead. It reflected the lamps clearly now, uninterrupted by drifting fragments. The surface moved evenly, holding light only briefly before releasing it downstream. The person stopped at the railing. They placed their hands there, feeling the familiar coolness. It was neither warmer nor colder than before. It simply was. They looked at the water. Nothing special appeared. And yet, the moment felt complete. Memory surfaced quietly. Not as image, not as narrative. It arrived as a gentle recognition, a knowing that this hour, this balance between light and shadow, had once carried something fleeting and beautiful. That it always would. The blossoms had passed. Their falling had ended. But the way the town slowed at dusk remained. The way the river accepted what came to it remained. The way light hesitated before leaving remained. The person breathed. The air entered and left without effort, carrying the ordinary scents of evening stone, water, leaves, distant cooking. Nothing sweet lingered now. Nothing needed to. Behind them, the town continued its soft rhythm. Doors closed. Voices faded. Radios murmured briefly, then quieted. The layers of sound thinned, settling into something gentle and unremarkable. The person turned away from the river. They walked back into the town, their steps steady, unmarked. Lamps guided the way. Shadows gathered between them, familiar and unthreatening. Above, the sky darkened fully. Stars emerged, patient and unchanged. The moon rose, its light cool and even. Night returned, not as repetition, but as continuation. The person walked on, and though the cherry blossoms no longer drifted after dusk, the memory of their movement remained woven into the town itself, into its timing, its quiet pauses, its gentle refusals to hurry. Nothing had been lost. Everything had simply moved on. And in that movement, the town rested, complete, waiting calmly for whatever season would follow. The sound of water beyond the hills. Prologue. The sound of water beyond the hills. Long before anyone in the village could remember their own names, before paths were worn into the earth by repeated footsteps. There was already the sound of water beyond the hills. It did not announce itself loudly. It did not demand to be heard. It simply existed, flowing where it had always flowed, moving through stone and root and shadow, shaping the land with patience older than language. The hills rose gently at the edge of the valley, their slopes softened by time. In the early mornings, mist gathered there like a slow breath, and from within that pale veil came the sound faint, continuous, neither near nor far. Those who listened carefully said it was a river. Others said it was many streams joining and separating again. Some believed it was the echo of rain that had fallen centuries ago and never fully left the earth. No one was certain, but everyone heard it. The village rested below the hills, arranged not by design but by habit. Houses leaned slightly toward one another, as if sharing quiet thoughts. Roof tiles darkened and lightened with the seasons. Narrow paths curved where straight lines would have felt unnatural. At the center stood no monument, only an old tree whose roots pushed up through the soil like slow questions. Life here did not hurry. Days unfolded in measured sequences: the opening of shutters, the heating of water, the careful preparation of food. Voices were soft, not because silence was required, but because loudness felt unnecessary. Even children learned early that there was space enough in the world without filling it. And always, beneath these ordinary sounds, there was water. It could be heard most clearly at night. When lamps were extinguished, and doors slid shut, when the village exhaled into sleep, the sound seemed to rise. It slipped through cracks in thought, through half-dreams and moments of wakefulness. Some said it came closer then, though the hills remained where they were. Others believed it was simply that the mind, freed from daylight concerns, became more open. An old woman once said that the water did not move toward them at all. "We moved toward it," she said quietly, without realizing. She had lived longer than most, long enough that her memories had begun to arrange themselves not by time, but by feeling. She remembered seasons more clearly than years, and the sound of water more clearly than faces. When she spoke, people listened, not because they fully understood, but because her words settled gently, like dust returning to the earth. Beyond the hills, the land folded inward. Forests thickened, paths narrowed, and stones grew slick with moisture. The water traveled there unseen, shaping its course beneath fallen leaves and tangled roots. It did not mind being hidden. It did not mind being forgotten for a while. Water was patient. Sometimes, travelers passed through the village. They came from towns nearer the sea or from mountain roads that led nowhere in particular. They stayed for a night, sometimes two. They asked about the hills, about what lay beyond them. "There is a river," the villagers would say. "How far?" the travelers asked. The villagers paused. Distance was not a simple thing here. "Far enough," someone would answer. Or, "Not as far as it sounds." No one ever pointed directly. They gestured instead, with an open hand, tracing a curve in the air that suggested ascent, effort, and eventual quiet. Most travelers moved on. A few lingered longer, listening in the evenings, their faces turned slightly toward the hills as if drawn by a memory they could not place. Very rarely, someone attempted the path beyond. Those who never spoke of difficulty. They spoke of time. They said the walk felt longer than expected, not because the way was hard, but because it asked something of them. The forest demanded attention. The ground required care. And always, the sound of water shifted, sometimes louder, sometimes fading, never allowing certainty. Not everyone returned. Those who did came back changed in ways that were subtle and therefore impossible to ignore. They moved more slowly. They listened more often than they spoke. And sometimes, in the middle of an ordinary conversation, they would fall silent, as if hearing something else beneath the words. The sound beyond the hills was not only water. It was time, folding over itself. It was a memory without ownership. In the village, children grew, left, and sometimes returned with their own children. The old tree at the center thickened, its roots pressing further into the ground. The houses were repaired, altered, and rebuilt. Names appeared and disappeared from memory like footprints in shallow water. But the sound remained. On certain afternoons, when the sun hung low and the air grew heavy with stillness, the sound could be heard even while awake. It drifted through open windows, mingling with the scent of tea and wood. In those moments, work slowed. Hands paused, eyes softened. No one announced these pauses. They happened naturally. The sound asked for nothing, yet it invited listening. It did not tell stories in the way voices did. It offered no clear beginning, no ending. Instead, it held space, an unbroken presence that allowed thoughts to settle and drift away again. Some believed that everyone carried a piece of that sound within them, like a hidden current. They believed that when people slept deeply, when dreams thinned into something gentler, that inner water aligned briefly with the water beyond the hills. Perhaps that was why the sound felt familiar even to those who had never followed it. At night, the hills darkened into simple shapes against the sky. Stars appeared slowly, unhurried. Crickets began their careful rhythms. And beneath it all, steady and calm, the water continued. It flowed past stones that had never been named. It passed under bridges that no longer existed. It moved toward places that would one day forget where it began. The village slept, and in sleep, people dreamed not of events, but of movement, walking without destination, standing beside unseen streams, listening to something both distant and close. In these dreams, no one was alone, yet no one needed company. The sound did not wake them. It carried them. Somewhere beyond the hills, the water turned, as it always had, following the shape of the land rather than resisting it. It accepted every bend, every narrowing, every widening into calm pools where the surface barely moved. And far in the future, so far that it felt like memory rather than possibility, someone would stand at the edge of that water and listen, not knowing they were part of a long, quiet story that had begun before words. For now, there was only the sound of water beyond the hills. Chapter 1: The house near the edge of the path. At the edge of the village, where the path began to narrow, and the houses stood a little farther apart, there was a small wooden house that faced the hills. It was not the newest house, nor the oldest. Its walls bore the quiet marks of repair, wood replaced where rot had once settled, paper screens patched with care rather than haste. The roof sloped gently, catching rain and letting it slide away without complaint. Inside lived a man named Haru. He had lived there for as long as he could remember, and for some time before that as well. His earliest memories were not of people, but of sounds: the creak of the floorboards at dawn, the soft thud of snow falling from the eaves in winter, and always, faintly, the sound of water beyond the hills. Haru did not think of himself as someone who listened more than others. He simply noticed that silence was never complete, and that within it there were layers. Some sounds belonged to the present moment. Others felt older, less attached to time. The water was like that. Each morning, Haru rose before the village fully woke. Not because he needed to, but because his body had learned this rhythm and no longer questioned it. He slid open the door quietly, letting cool air enter the room, and stood for a moment on the threshold. From there, the hills were visible, their outlines softened by distance. Depending on the season, they were green, brown, or hidden behind mist. Haru did not search for the source of the sound with his eyes. He knew better than to expect it to be seen. He prepared tea slowly. The kettle sang briefly, then fell silent. Steam curled upward, disappearing as soon as it formed. Haru poured the water carefully, as if listening to the way it met the cup. Sometimes he wondered if all water carried memory. After tea, he tended to small tasks. He swept the narrow space in front of the house, though it was rarely dirty. He adjusted things that did not strictly need adjusting. These actions anchored him, giving shape to time. Neighbors passed occasionally, offering a nod or a quiet greeting. Conversations were short, comfortable in their brevity. "You're up early," someone might say. "I woke," Haru would reply, which was explanation enough. He worked in the village, repairing what others no longer wished to repair. Chairs with loose joints, doors that no longer slid smoothly, tools worn thin by years of use. People trusted his hands. He did not hurry them. While he worked, the sound of water sometimes drifted closer, as if passing behind his thoughts. At other times, it receded, leaving only the immediate noises of wood and breath and movement. Haru never tried to hold on to it. In the afternoons, when light stretched long and shadows deepened, he often paused. He would sit outside his house, facing the hills, and let time move without his participation. These were not moments of rest exactly, but of alignment, as if he were allowing himself to fall into the same rhythm as the land. He remembered being a child and asking his grandmother about the sound. "Where does it go?" he had asked. She had smiled, not answering right away. Her hands had continued their work, weaving reeds into a basket. "It goes where it needs to," she said at last. "Just like people. Does it ever stop?" Haru had asked. She had shaken her head gently. "No, but sometimes it becomes very quiet." That answer had stayed with him, not because it explained anything, but because it felt complete. Haru's grandmother had lived in the same house. When she died, there was no ceremony beyond what was necessary. She had not wanted one. Her presence faded gradually, as if she had simply stepped into another room. Afterward, Haru noticed that the sound of water felt closer for a time. Or perhaps he noticed it more. In the evenings, as the village settled, Haru cooked simple meals. Rice, vegetables, and soup when the air grew cold. He ate slowly, listening to the way night arrived not suddenly, but in layers. The calls of birds ceased. Insects took their place. Somewhere, a door slid shut. Somewhere else, laughter rose briefly, then faded. And beneath it all, the water. There were nights when sleep came easily, carrying him down into soft darkness. There were other nights when he lay awake, his thoughts drifting without direction. On those nights, he listened more closely. The sound was never the same. Sometimes it felt like movement over stone, steady and assured. Other times it felt like many small sounds overlapping, a conversation without words. Once in a while, it seemed to pause, though Haru suspected that was only his own attention shifting. He did not assign meaning to these variations. Meaning implied resolution, and the sound had none. One evening, as summer began to turn toward autumn, Haru noticed something different. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable, and he might have dismissed it if not for the way it lingered. The sound of water, usually distant and even, seemed closer, not louder, but nearer, as if the space between it and the village had thinned. Haru stood outside his house, the air cool against his skin. The hills were dark shapes now, their details lost to the night. He closed his eyes. The sound did not change. It did not call to him. It did not urge him forward. And yet, for the first time, Haru felt that listening alone might no longer be enough. This thought did not disturb him. It settled quietly, like a stone placed carefully on the ground. He did not act on it. He did not need to. Not yet. The night continued. The village slept. And the water beyond the hills flowed on, carrying with it the patience of countless turns. Haru returned inside, sliding the door shut with care. As he lay down, he felt the sound recede slightly, returning to its familiar distance. Sleep came, and within it, he dreamed of walking not away from the village, not toward it, but alongside something unseen, moving at the same pace, neither leading nor following. Chapter 2: The Woman Who Measured Time by Shadows. On the opposite side of the village, where the path curved away from the hills and dipped gently toward the fields, there lived a woman named Aiko. Her house was smaller than most, set slightly back from the road, half hidden by tall grasses that swayed even when there was little wind. From her window, the hills were not visible. Instead, she faced open sky and the slow movement of clouds. Aiko did not mind this. She had never felt the need to look directly at the hills to know they were there. Their presence was something she sensed rather than saw, like the weight of the air before rain or the subtle shift that marked the end of a season. She worked as a keeper of records, though the village rarely used such formal words. She copied old documents when the ink began to fade, repaired scrolls whose edges had grown fragile, and stored them carefully in boxes that smelled faintly of wood and time. Dates mattered less to her than sequences. She noticed how one thing followed another, how patterns repeated with small variations. When she thought of the past, she did not imagine events, but moments of transition: the first frost, the last cicada, the way light changed its angle across the floor as the year progressed. Each morning, Aiko opened her shutters and observed the shadows cast by a narrow post outside her house. She did not record their length or position. She simply noticed them. This was how she measured time. The sound of water reached her house less clearly than it did others. The open fields absorbed it, thinning it into something almost imagined. And yet, on certain days, especially when the air was heavy and still, Aiko could hear it faintly, threading through the quiet like a memory that did not belong to her alone. When she first noticed the sound as a child, she had thought it was the wind. Her mother had corrected her gently. "That's not the wind," she had said. "The wind moves too quickly." "What is it, then?" Aiko had asked. Her mother had considered this. "It's what remains when everything else passes." That answer had stayed with her. Aiko spent much of her time alone, but she was not isolated. People came to her when they needed something: preserved words, names, agreements. She listened carefully, asking a few questions. When she wrote, her hand moved steadily, as if guided by something beneath conscious thought. Sometimes, as she worked, she paused. In those pauses, she listened not for the water itself, but for the space it created. There was a quality to the silence that followed its faint presence, a softness that allowed thoughts to loosen their edges. On one such afternoon, Aiko was copying a record older than any living person in the village. The paper was thin, the ink uneven. Many of the names meant nothing to her now. And yet, as she traced them, she felt a quiet continuity, as if each name had been carried forward by something unseen. The sound of water rose slightly then, just enough for her to notice. She stopped writing. The room felt unchanged, and yet there was a sense of adjustment, like a subtle shift in balance. Aiko rested her brush and closed her eyes. For a moment, she thought of the hills not as a place, but as a threshold. That evening, she visited the old tree at the center of the village. She did not go there often, but when she did, it was without a specific reason. The tree stood as it always had, its bark rough, its leaves whispering. Haru was there as well, seated on a low stone, his gaze unfocused. They did not speak at first. The sound of water was present, faint but unmistakable, weaving through the evening air. Aiko wondered if Haru heard it differently, if it reached him more fully because of where his house stood. Eventually, she spoke. "Does it sound closer to you?" she asked. Haru considered this. "Sometimes," he said, "but closer doesn't feel like the right word." Aiko nodded. She understood. They sat in silence again, the kind that did not require explanation. Around them, the village moved gently toward night. Lamps flickered on. Voices drifted, then settled. Aiko thought of the records she kept, of how much effort went into holding things in place. She thought of how easily water ignored such efforts, flowing regardless of memory or intention. "Do you think it remembers us?" she asked quietly. Haru did not answer right away. When he did, his voice was calm. "I think it remembers movement," he said. Not who moved. That felt true to her. Later, as Aiko walked home under a sky scattered with stars, she noticed that her steps had slowed. She did not resist this. The fields lay quiet, their shapes softened by darkness. The sound of water reached her once more, faint but steady. She realized then that she had begun to listen for it not as a sound, but as a measure, something that marked change without counting it. That night, she dreamed of shadows moving across an empty page, not erasing what was written, but making space for what would come next. Beyond the hills, the water continued its patient course. And in the village, two lives unremarkable in their own eyes shifted slightly, like stones adjusting within a riverbed, unaware that the current had already begun to gather. Chapter 3: The Path That Did Not Insist. The path beyond the village did not begin clearly. It was not marked by signs or stones placed with intention. It emerged instead through use, through the gradual agreement of many feet choosing the same direction over time. At first, it looked no different from any other narrow trail that led between fields or into the lower edge of the forest. Only after a while did it begin to feel like something else. Haru noticed this one morning without meaning to. He had finished a repair earlier than expected and found himself with a stretch of unclaimed time. The air was cool, the light soft. He walked, not toward a destination, but away from habit. The village thinned behind him. Houses gave way to grasses. Grasses gave way to trees. The sound of daily life softened, replaced by the more diffuse presence of wind and insects. Beneath it all, steady and nearly imperceptible, was the sound of water. It did not grow louder. That was what surprised him. No matter how far he walked, the sound seemed to maintain the same distance, like a horizon that adjusted itself quietly. Haru slowed, then stopped. He listened, not straining, but allowing the sound to be where it was. The path continued ahead. It did not promise anything. It did not warn him away. Haru took another step. The forest deepened, not suddenly, but in layers. Light filtered through leaves in shifting patterns. The ground grew uneven, though not difficult. Roots crossed the path like old lines drawn and redrawn. As he walked, Haru became aware of his breathing. It aligned naturally with his pace. There was no sense of effort, only attention. He remembered something his grandmother had once said, long ago, as they stood together near the edge of the forest. "Some paths are not meant to be chosen," she had said. "They are meant to be noticed." At the time, he had not understood. Now, he did not try to. Further along, the air grew cooler. Moisture clung faintly to stone and bark. The sound of water shifted not in volume, but in texture. It felt closer to its source, less dispersed. Haru stopped again. He could turn back. The thought arrived without urgency. He could also continue. Neither option felt heavier than the other. Behind him, the forest did not close. Ahead, it did not open. Everything waited in balance. After a moment, Haru sat on a low rock beside the path. He placed his hands on his knees and listened. The sound of water threaded through the forest, weaving with the quiet creaks and movements of living things. He felt no sense of arrival. He felt no sense of leaving. Time behaved differently here. It did not stretch or compress, it simply loosened. Minutes passed, or perhaps longer. Haru did not count. Eventually, he stood and turned back. The return felt neither shorter nor longer than the walk out. The path accepted his steps without comment. When the village came back into view, it did so gently, as if it had never fully disappeared. That evening, Aiko noticed something. Haru sat beneath the old tree as usual, but there was a difference in how he held himself, not dramatic, not obvious. It was as if a small tension he had not known he carried had been set down somewhere along the way. "You walked," she said. "Yes," he replied. "Far?" "Not far," he said after a pause. "But far enough." She did not ask more. The sound of water moved between them, faint but steady. Aiko felt it then with unusual clarity, as if the path Haru had taken had adjusted something in the air itself. That night, the village slept deeply. Haru dreamed of standing beside water he could not see, only hear. It flowed calmly, unconcerned with his presence. He did not try to follow it. He simply stood, listening, until the sound and his own thoughts became indistinguishable. Aiko dreamed of a path drawn in ink that slowly blurred, not disappearing, but blending into the page until it could no longer be separated from the space around it. Beyond the hills, the water passed another bend. It carried with it no message, no intention, only continuity. And yet, without effort, it had begun to shape the quiet choices of those who lived within its distant reach. Chapter 4: The One Who Turned Back. There was a name that appeared more than once in the village's old records. It was not a name often spoken aloud. It surfaced instead in fragments on a repaired scroll, in the margin of a ledger, in a story told without detail. The name belonged to someone who had once walked beyond the hills and returned. Aiko noticed it first. She had been reorganizing a box of documents that had not been opened in years. The paper inside was brittle, and the ink faded to a soft brown. As she handled each piece with care, she began to recognize the repetition of the name, appearing across decades, always in a similar context. She did not read the records as a narrative. She read them as traces. The name belonged to a man called Satoru. Nothing else was written about him with certainty. There were no dates of birth or death recorded clearly. Only mentions Satoru departed. Satoru returned. Satoru spoke little afterward. Aiko paused. She closed her eyes and listened. The sound of water reached her faintly, steady and unchanged. It did not seem to respond to her attention, yet she felt it aligned with her thoughts, as if acknowledging them without comment. That evening, she asked the oldest woman in the village. The woman's eyes were clouded with age, but her voice remained even. When Aiko spoke the name, there was no surprise. "Yes," the woman said. He turned back. "From where?" Aiko asked. The woman considered this. "From where most do," she said. "Before the water could be seen." "Why?" The woman's hands rested still in her lap. Because he understood something. What did he understand? That going on and turning back are not opposites. Aiko let the words settle. Later, she told Haru what she had learned. He listened quietly, his gaze directed toward the hills, though night had already softened their outline. "Do you think he failed?" Haru asked. Aiko shook her head. "I don't think the word applies." They sat beneath the old tree, the ground cool beneath them. The sound of water threaded through the night, neither closer nor farther than usual. Haru thought of the path, of how it had not insisted. He thought of how easily he had turned back without regret. Perhaps Satoru had done the same. In the days that followed, Aiko found herself paying closer attention to the spaces between words in the records. She noticed how often absence was more carefully preserved than presence. Names that appeared once and vanished. Events are mentioned only indirectly. The sound of water seemed to underline these gaps, not filling them, but making them more visible. One afternoon, as autumn deepened, Aiko added a note to a repaired scroll, not a fact, but an observation. She wrote that Satoru had returned, and that his return had been complete. She did not explain what she meant. That night, Haru dreamed of walking until the forest thinned and the air grew heavy with moisture. He dreamed of stopping just before the sound of water resolved into sight. In the dream, he turned back, not because he was afraid, but because the moment felt finished. He woke before dawn, the sound of water already present. Beyond the hills, the water flowed as it always had. It carried no record of who had followed it or who had turned away. And yet, in the village, its distant presence continued to shape lives not by calling them forward, but by allowing them to choose. Chapter 5. When the season shifted without announcement. The change did not arrive with ceremony. There was no single morning when the village awoke to find the world transformed. Instead, the season shifted gradually, quietly, as if not wishing to interrupt anything already in motion. The leaves yellowed one by one. The air cooled in subtle increments. The sound of water beyond the hills grew slightly clearer on certain evenings, though no one could have said exactly when this began. People noticed other things first. Meals became warmer. Hands lingered near cups of tea. Doors slid shut a little earlier in the evening. These changes happened without discussion, guided by something shared and unspoken. Haru found that his work slowed, not because there was less to do, but because he allowed more space between tasks. He listened more carefully to the materials he handled, the grain of wood, the tension in joints long held together. It felt important not to rush. Aiko noticed that the shadows she observed each morning grew longer, their movement more deliberate. The post outside her house cast a shape that lingered, as if reluctant to move on. The sound of water accompanied these observations, faint but steady. It did not signal the change. It simply moved alongside it. One evening, the village gathered for a small seasonal meal. It was not a festival, just a shared acknowledgement of the passage of time. People brought simple dishes. Conversation drifted and settled. Laughter appeared briefly, then softened. As night fell, someone remarked on the sound. "It seems clearer lately," they said. Others listened. "Yes," someone else agreed. "Or maybe we're quieter." No conclusion was reached, and none was needed. Haru sat near the edge of the gathering, his attention divided between the voices around him and the presence beyond the hills. He felt a gentle pull, not forward, not backward, but inward, as if something were asking him to notice his own stillness. Aiko watched the group from a small distance. She felt the season settle into her body, marking itself not with cold, but with clarity. The sound of water reached her then with unusual precision, each layer distinct. For a moment, she imagined that the village itself was listening. Later that night, as people returned to their homes, the paths glistened faintly with moisture. The hills stood dark and patient. The sound of water continued, unbroken. Beyond the hills, leaves fell into unseen streams. Water carried them gently, neither holding nor releasing them, simply allowing them to move on. In the village, sleep came easily. And beneath sleep, the quiet awareness remained that something had shifted, not toward an end, but toward a deeper alignment with what had always been there. Chapter 6: The One Who Was Born Near Water. There was a man in the village who had been born closer to water than anyone else. This was not something he spoke of often, and when he did, it was without emphasis. It was simply a fact that had followed him, like a faint scent that never fully faded. His name was Ren. Ren lived near the lower edge of the fields, where the land dipped slightly and gathered moisture after rain. A narrow channel ran behind his house, carrying water away from the village during heavy storms. Most of the year, it was dry or nearly so, but Ren treated it with the same attention one might give to something always present. He said that when he was born, rain had fallen for 3 days without pause. The midwife later told his mother that she had never heard water sound like that before. Not loud, not violent, but continuous, as if the sky itself had settled into a rhythm. Ren's first cry had been quiet, brief, and quickly replaced by listening. As he grew, Ren developed a sensitivity that others noticed but did not fully understand. He could tell when rain would come along before clouds gathered. He paused instinctively near streams, even when they were hidden. And when the sound of water beyond the hills shifted, he felt it as a change in pressure, not in volume. Ren worked in the fields, though he did not consider himself a farmer. He knew the soil well, understood how water moved beneath it, where it pooled, where it vanished. He placed his steps carefully, as if aware that the ground itself was listening. Unlike Haru, Ren did not face the hills when he rested. He faced downward, toward the earth. His connection was not with distance, but with depth. One afternoon, as the season leaned fully into autumn, Ren stood beside the dry channel behind his house. He had felt something change that morning, a slight tightening, then release, like a breath taken and let go. The sound of water beyond the hills was present, but layered now, complex. Ren knelt and placed his hand on the ground. It was cool, damp. He closed his eyes. For a moment, he thought of his mother, long gone, who had once told him that water remembered everything it touched. At the time, he had believed her completely. Now, he understood that belief was not required. That evening, Ren walked toward the center of the village. He did not usually join gatherings unless needed, But tonight felt different, not urgent, but aligned. He found Haru and Aiko beneath the old tree. They did not greet him with surprise. "You felt it too," Aiko said. Ren nodded. "It's closer to the surface." Haru listened. "Do you think it will rise?" Ren considered this. "Not upward," he said. "Inward." They sat together in silence. The sound of water moved through the village with unusual clarity, threading its way through walls, through breath, and into memory. Ren felt no fear. He felt recognition. Later, as he returned home, the dry channel behind his house held a thin line of water for the first time in months. It reflected the night sky faintly, stars wavering in its surface. Ren watched it for a long time. Beyond the hills, water continued its patient movement. It did not distinguish between surface and depth, between seen and unseen. It flowed where space allowed it. And in the village, those who were listening felt a subtle truth take shape: the water was not approaching them. They were becoming able to hear it more fully. Chapter 7. The night the village listened together. The night arrived without distinction. There was no storm, no sudden change in weather to mark it. The sky darkened as it always did, stars appearing one by one. Lamps were lit. Doors slid shut. The village settled into its usual rhythms. And yet, something held. People noticed it not as an event, but as a pause that extended longer than expected. Conversations trailed off naturally. Movements slowed. Even the animals grew quiet, as if sensing that sound was no longer needed. The sound of water beyond the hills was present, clearer than it had ever been. Not louder. Clearer. It moved through the village as a continuous thread, unbroken by walls or distance. Those who were awake heard it distinctly. Those who slept heard it in dreams, carried not as noise, but as motion. Haru lay awake in his house near the path. He had not planned to stay awake. Sleep simply had not arrived yet. He listened, not searching for meaning, but allowing the sound to be as it was. He felt no urge to rise. Across the village, Aiko sat by her window, the shutters open. The post outside cast a long shadow in the lamplight, unmoving. She watched it without measuring, without expectation. She realized that time felt wide. Near the fields, Ren stood outside, barefoot on the cool earth. The thin stream behind his house flowed steadily now, fed by something unseen. It made no sound of its own. It did not need to. The water beyond the hills carried all of this. In one house, a child stirred in sleep and whispered something unintelligible, then settled again. In another, an elderly man smiled faintly, remembering a walk he had never taken. No one spoke of it aloud, and yet the experience was shared. The sound held the village together, not as a force, but as a field, an unspoken agreement to listen rather than act. Eventually, as the night deepened, the clarity softened. The sound returned to its familiar distance, not receding, simply resuming its usual place within the layers of quiet. People slept. In the morning, no one announced what had happened. There were no questions, no explanations offered. And yet, something had settled. Haru found that his steps felt lighter. Aiko noticed that the shadows moved again, unhurried but definite. Ren saw that the stream behind his house thinned, though the ground remained damp, as if holding memory. The sound of water beyond the hills continued, unchanged in itself, but no longer quite the same to those who heard it. It had not come closer. They had listened more fully. Chapter 8, where the water spread instead of ending. Beyond the hills, the water did not gather into a single, dramatic form. There was no great fall, no sudden widening that marked an arrival. Instead, the land opened gradually, allowing the water to spread. It divided and rejoined, slipping into shallow beds, feeding moss and reed, dissolving into the soil only to surface again a short distance away. If one were to stand there, it would not feel like reaching a destination. It would feel like entering a condition. In the village, this spreading made itself known quietly. Haru noticed it first in his work. Wood that once felt dry responded differently under his hands. Joints settled more easily. The grain seemed to guide his tools, as if asking not to be forced. He adjusted his movements accordingly. Aiko noticed it in the records. When she copied older texts now, the words felt less fixed. Their meanings softened, allowing multiple readings to exist without conflict. She stopped trying to preserve exactness and focused instead on continuity. Ren noticed it in the ground. Water no longer moved only along familiar channels. It seeped, appeared in unexpected places, vanished again. The land felt alive in a way that did not demand attention but rewarded it. None of them spoke of this directly. One afternoon, Haru walked the path again. He did not plan how far he would go. The forest welcomed him with the same patient neutrality as before. The sound of water accompanied him, neither guiding nor misleading. This time, he did not stop where he had before. He walked a little farther, then a little more. Not because he wanted to reach the water, but because the space between steps felt generous. Eventually, the forest thinned. Light reflected differently here, scattered by moisture. The air carried a faint coolness that settled on his skin. Haru stopped. He could not see the water, but he felt its presence differently now, not as a distant sound, but as an atmosphere. The ground beneath his feet held it. The leaves above him released it slowly. He understood then that the water was not meant to be approached directly. It was meant to be entered. Haru did not step forward. He turned back, carrying the sensation with him, not as memory, but as alignment. That evening, Aiko added another note to the records. She did not write of water. She wrote of change that did not replace what came before, but expanded around it. Ren, standing beside the field at dusk, felt the water move beneath the soil like a long breath. He placed his hand on the ground once more, not to listen, but to acknowledge. Beyond the hills, the water continued to spread, touching more ground without claiming it. It left no clear boundary between itself and what surrounded it. And in the village, those who listened began to understand the sound of water beyond the hills had never been a call toward an end. It was an invitation to widen. Chapter 9: Those Who Left and Those Who Carried the Sound Back. There were always those who left the village. This was not unusual, nor was it spoken of with sadness. Leaving was understood as one of the ways a life could move, just as staying was another. Paths extended outward in many directions, and some people followed them without looking back. Most did not carry the sound of water with them. They remembered the village, the hills, the rhythm of days, but the sound faded gradually, blending into other noises, other concerns. This was not a loss. It was a change. But once in a while, someone returned. They came back altered in ways that resisted description. Their clothes showed wear from other places. Their speech carried unfamiliar rhythms. Yet beneath these differences, something else remained quiet, steady. They carried the sound, not as something they could reproduce or explain, but as a way of listening that did not leave them. One such person returned in late autumn. Her name was Mio. She had left the village years earlier, while still young, drawn by a restlessness she had not tried to understand. She traveled to places near the sea, to towns where water moved differently, broad, reflective, endless. When she returned, the village recognized her slowly. Faces remembered before names. Her steps were measured, unhurried, as if she had learned to walk alongside something invisible. Mio did not speak much of where she had been. When asked what had brought her back, she answered simply, "I wanted to hear it again." "What?" someone asked. "The sound," she said. Haru met her near the path one afternoon. They stood facing the hills, though neither looked directly at them. "It never left," Haru said. Mio nodded. "No," she agreed. "But I needed to know that." Aiko noticed that when Mio spoke, pauses gathered naturally around her words. Silence did not rush to fill the space. It settled comfortably. Ren felt it most clearly when Mio passed near the fields. The ground responded subtly, as if recognizing a familiar pattern. That evening, Mio stood beneath the old tree with the others. The sound of water beyond the hills was present, steady and calm. She closed her eyes and listened. "It's wider now," she said quietly. No one asked how she knew. Beyond the hills, the water continued its patient movement, touching places far beyond the village, far beyond memory. Some of it would reach the sea. Some would remain, absorbed into earth and time. And in the village, those who left and those who stayed understood something together. The sound was not bound to place. It moved with attention. Chapter 10: The Shape of What Continues. There was no moment when the village realized it had reached something like an ending. Instead, there was a growing sense that the idea no longer applied. Days continued to unfold as they always had. Work was done. Meals were shared. Sleep arrived and departed in its own time. And yet, beneath these familiar movements, something had eased open, allowing each moment to settle more fully into the next. Haru noticed it in how he began his mornings. He no longer paused at the threshold of his house to listen for the sound of water. It was already there, woven into the air, into his breathing. The hills still stood before him, unchanged in shape, but their presence felt less like a boundary and more like a gesture. He worked less with intention and more with response. When a chair resisted repair, he did not force it. He waited. Often, the solution emerged not as an action, but as a release. Aiko noticed it in how she read the records. She no longer felt compelled to preserve every mark exactly as it had been. Instead, she allowed certain edges to soften, certain gaps to remain open. History, she realized, did not weaken when it was allowed to breathe. She added fewer notes now. And when she did write, it was not to define, but to accompany. Ren noticed it in the fields. Water appeared where it had not before, not in streams, but in presence. The soil held moisture longer. Seeds responded more evenly. He found that when he listened closely, the land itself seemed to suggest where to step, where to pause. Mio noticed it most of all in herself. She had expected to feel like someone who had returned. Instead, she felt like someone who had widened. The village did not reclaim her. It met her where she now stood. One evening, they all gathered beneath the old tree. No one had called the gathering. It happened as if each person had arrived separately, guided by a shared inclination rather than a plan. The tree stood as it always had, its roots deep, its branches open. The sound of water beyond the hills was present, but it no longer felt distant. It did not feel near either. It felt embedded. No one spoke for a long time. Eventually, Aiko said, "I don't think it's something we follow anymore." Haru nodded. "It's something we keep." Ren shook his head slightly. "Not keep," he said. "Share." Mio listened, then spoke softly. "Become." The words settled without needing agreement. Above them, the sky darkened into night. Stars appeared slowly, unhurried. The village lights flickered on, one by one. Somewhere, a child laughed briefly, then grew quiet. Beyond the hills, water continued to move not toward an end, not away from a beginning, but through every space that allowed it. And in the village, the sound of water was no longer something beyond. It was the shape of what continued. Chapter 11, Returning without leaving. It became difficult to say when the listening began. There was no first moment to point to, no clear distinction between before and after. The village did not change its shape, nor did the hills shift their position. And yet, the way attention moved had altered, settling more evenly across each day. Haru found that he no longer thought of the path as leading away. When he walked it now, it felt less like a departure and more like a continuation. The forest received him without comment, just as it always had. Light filtered through leaves in familiar patterns. Roots crossed the ground where they always had. The sound of water accompanied him, steady and calm. He noticed that he did not walk as far as he once had. Not because he could not, but because there was no longer a sense of distance to resolve. Each step felt complete on its own. Sometimes he turned back after only a short while. Sometimes he stood still for long stretches of time, listening. Both felt equally full. Aiko noticed that people began to ask her fewer questions. They still came with documents, with names, with memories they wished to hold. But they no longer asked her to fix the meaning in place. They trusted her to let things remain open. She reorganized the records again, this time not by age or topic, but by proximity, what felt near to what. She did not label the system. It did not need explanation. When she finished, she closed the boxes and sat quietly, listening to the sound of water move through the afternoon. Ren noticed that the ground beneath the village held moisture even on days without rain. He knelt often, not to check, but to acknowledge. The earth felt responsive, not as something to be managed, but as something in conversation. When he walked, he felt the subtle give beneath his feet, the quiet agreement between step and soil. Mio noticed that she began to dream differently. In her dreams, she no longer traveled. She stood beside water that did not move past her, but around her. She did not try to follow it. She did not need to. When she woke, the sound of water was already there, threaded through the morning air. One afternoon, the old woman who had spoken of Satoru sat beneath the tree again. Her movements were slow now, deliberate. Aiko sat with her. "Do you remember him?" Aiko asked gently. The woman nodded. "I remember his listening. What did he say when he returned?" The woman smiled faintly. "Very little." Aiko waited. "He said that the water was patient," the woman continued. "And that patience was not waiting. It was allowing." That evening, the village gathered once more, not all at once, not with intention, but as if drawn by a shared ease. They stood or sat beneath the tree, along the paths, near their homes. No one spoke of the water. They did not need to. The sound was present, steady and calm, neither beyond nor within, but threading through everything that was. Beyond the hills, water continued its movement, unchanged in itself, yet endlessly shaped by what allowed it to pass. And in the village, people listened not because they were seeking something, but because listening had become the natural shape of being. Chapter 12, Where Sound Became Rest. There was a morning when the village woke without noticing that it had slept especially deeply. No dreams were remembered clearly. No sudden insights lingered at the edges of thought. And yet, people moved through their first moments of wakefulness with an unusual ease, as if something within them had settled into a more stable rhythm. The sound of water was there. It did not arrive in the morning. It had not left during the night. It existed without contrast. Haru rose and opened his door. The air was cool, still holding the memory of night. The hills stood quietly, their outlines softened by a pale light that did not yet feel like day. He listened. The sound no longer drew his attention forward. It did not suggest movement. Instead, it felt like a surface, something on which awareness could rest without sinking. He made tea. The kettle warmed. Steam rose and vanished. Each sound folded gently into the next, without hierarchy. Aiko opened her shutters and looked at the post outside her house. Its shadow lay faintly across the ground, almost indistinguishable from the surrounding light. She did not observe it for change. She observed it for its presence. Time did not feel wide or narrow. It felt sufficient. Ren stood near the fields, his bare feet on damp soil. The ground held moisture evenly now, no longer gathering or releasing it in noticeable patterns. He sensed the water beneath not as movement, but as steadiness. It was no longer something to respond to. It was something to trust. Mio walked through the village paths, her steps unmarked by urgency or hesitation. She passed familiar houses, familiar faces. Nothing called out to her. Nothing resisted her presence. She realized then that she no longer carried the sound with her. She was within it. At the center of the village, the old tree stood unchanged. Its leaves stirred slightly, though there was little wind. Beneath it, the ground felt cool and firm, shaped by years of stillness. One by one, people passed near it, not gathering, not avoiding. Some paused. Some did not. All were included. The sound of water beyond the hills was no longer perceived as beyond. It was not localized. It did not point. It rested. Beyond the hills, water continued its patient course, touching stone, root, soil, and space. It did not mark beginnings or endings. It did not distinguish between near and far. And in the village, the sound that had once been distant became indistinguishable from quiet itself. Listening no longer required attention. It had become rest. Epilogue, the sound that was never beyond. Long before anyone in the village could remember their own names, there was already water moving through the land. And long after names softened and loosened their hold, it would still be there. The hills remained where they had always been, not as barriers, not as destinations, but as gentle folds in the earth. Mist still gathered there in the early mornings. Light still changed its angle across their slopes as seasons passed without announcement. The village continued. Houses aged and were repaired. Paths shifted slightly as feet chose them again and again. Children grew, left, returned, or did not. None of this required explanation. The old tree at the center stood quietly, its roots deep, its branches open. Leaves fell and returned in new forms. The ground beneath it held the memory of countless pauses. Haru continued his work, though fewer things seemed broken now. When he repaired, it felt less like correction and more like conversation. His hands moved with ease, guided by a listening that no longer sought. Aiko kept the records, though they had become lighter. Some were allowed to fade naturally. Others were copied with care, not to preserve exactness, but to maintain flow. She understood that memory did not live in words alone. Ren tended the land, though the land no longer needed tending in the same way. Water moved beneath the surface with quiet confidence. Seeds found their places without instruction. He walked gently, knowing the ground was already aware. Mio lived among them, neither returned nor departed. She moved through days without measuring them, through nights without naming them. The sound she had once sought no longer felt separate from her breath. And the sound itself, it was no longer described. It was not pointed out to visitors. It was not named in stories. It did not require belief or understanding. It existed as presence, as continuity, as the quiet agreement between movement and rest. Beyond the hills, water continued to flow. It passed through stone and root and shadow. It spread where space allowed it. It narrowed where it must. It reached the sea in some places and never did in others. It did not mind. The sound that had once been called beyond was never distant at all. It had always been threaded through listening, through time, through the spaces where attention softened and widened. If someone were to arrive at the village now and stand quietly at dusk, they might hear it. Or they might not. Either way, it would be there. Not calling. Not waiting, not ending, only moving, only resting, like water.